Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to today's The Hindu News Analysis. In today's news analysis, we'll be discussing about 8 important news articles in the Hindu newspaper today. Coming to the first page and the first news article, Prime Minister reviews LAC standoff with NSA, CDS and 3 service chiefs. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday reviewed the current situation on the line of actual control LAC and the ongoing standoff with China with National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, Chief of Defense Staff General Bipin Rawat and the 3 service chiefs, multiple sources said. Several rounds of talks on the ground up to the level of the division commanders have failed to break the impasse along the LOC. So we know that there have been issues between India and China along the LOC at three main areas. One is Pangong So Lake in Ladakh, then Galwan Nala in Ladakh, and Nakula Pass in Ladakh. So earlier in the day, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh at a meeting to review the ongoing military reforms with the CDS, the three service chiefs and the other officials of the ministry also discussed the situation along the LAC. Also, in this meeting with the defense minister, the meeting was mainly to review the implementation of the recommendations of the Shekatkar committee. So here from the prelims perspective, you have to learn about two concepts. One is CDS, Chief of Defense Staff, and another one is the Shekatkar committee. So what is the CDS? The idea of CDS or Chief of Defense Staff, it is a post which was already in talks after the 1999 Kargil War. So after the Kargil War, there was a committee which is called Kargil Review Committee. So this committee told that there should be a post called the Chief of Defense Staff in order to improve the coordination between all the forces of the country, that is Army, Air, Navy and the Air Force. So he'll be the senior most defense personnel in the country. But the discussion went on and until August 15, 2019, when Prime Minister Modi announced on the Independence Day that the post of the CDS will be created, and in 2019 December the Cabinet Committee on Security has decided to create the post of the CDS, and in 2020 Jan 1st, that is this year itself, the post of CDS was created and General Bipin Rawat became the first Chief of Defense Staff of the country. So since this is in current affairs, you should be learning about this. And coming to Shekatkar committee recommendation, Shekatkar committee was constituted in 2018 in order to enhance the combat capability of the armed forces as well as to rebalance the defense expenditure. So you have to learn that Shekatkar committee is related to reforms in the armed forces, right? Also, the recently the border infrastructure recommendation of the Shekatkar committee has been accepted by the government. So this Shekatkar committee is also in current affairs, so you should be learning about it for prelims perspective. Now, coming to the other news, Chinese President Xi Jinping called on the military to think about worst case scenarios and scale up battle preparedness. So, we can see that tensions are being increased in the line of actual control between India and China. Coming to the next news article, no WHO bar on India testing hydroxychloroquine as preventive. The World Health Organization's WHO the moratorium on testing hydroxychloroquine, the controversial anti-malarial drug for treating COVID-19, which was announced on Monday, doesn't imply that India should post testing the drug as a preventive, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, chief scientist of WHO, told. However, she also stressed that India should be doing stricter trials to and test the drug's efficacy first. So HCQ, it was one of the 4 drug combinations being tested in the global clinical trial called the Solidarity Trial, coordinated by the WHO. So you should be learning this for prelims perspective. So what is Solidarity Trial? It is a global clinical trial to find the medicine against the COVID-19 vaccine, and it is coordinated by WHO. So it can be it is important from prelims perspective. Also, which are the other 4 drugs? Which are the other drugs? They are remdesivir, lopinavir, ritonavir, lopinavir and ritonavir with interferon beta 1A and hydroxychloroquine. So these are the 4 drugs which are currently being tested against the patients suffering with COVID-19. So anyway, WHO has told that there should be proper randomized clinical trials before testing any of these drugs to prevent the COVID-19. So some of the studies have also shown that HCQ shows no benefit, in fact put the patient at greater harm. So these kind of studies also necessitate that proper trials should be first done before using any such medicine on the patients. Now coming to the COVID related news, India added 6017 cases. So India has registered 6017 fresh COVID-19 cases and 175 fatalities on Tuesday according to the data from the state health departments. So the overall tally has now stands at 1,50,775 cases, including 82,171 active cases and 4,345 deaths. Now, coming to another important news article, ensure transport food for migrants. Supreme Court tells center and the states. A three judge bench of the Supreme Court on Tuesday said that there have been inadequacies and certain lapses on the part of the center and the state governments in dealing with the migrant workers crisis. So during the COVID-19 lockdown, so the court has also ordered the center and the states to immediately provide transport, food and shelter free of cost to the stranded migrant workers. So the suo to cognizance of the media reports and representations from senior lawyers to set up step into the protection of fundamental protect the fundamental rights of the migrant workers were taken by the judges in their chamber. So this is a good step by the Supreme Court, who have till now avoided interfering in the migrant crisis. So the Supreme Court has now interfered to protect the migrant crisis, and they also told the center and the states to provide free transport, food and accommodation for the migrants, right? So that is a good step. Now coming to the editorial of the day, oil price pickle. So Union Petroleum Minister Dharmendra Pradhan his recent remark that the center is taking a cautious and conscious approach of ensuring a balance in the fuel prices and aims to use the resultant savings from welfare is on the face of it is unexceptional. So we have seen that even though the global crude prices have come down, the government of India have decided against reducing any fuel prices. So the petroleum minister is telling that this extra savings can be used for the welfare of the people. So this is actually not a proper right step to do. India had an opportunity to pass on the benefit to customers and provide a fillip to becalmed consumption. So if this price reduction was happening, then there would have been savings in the personal disposable income. It would have improved the demand in the other areas. So the deregulated oil price companies also chose not to reduce the pump prices. It is the government's decision earlier in May to raise excise duty on petrol and diesel for a second time in less than 2 months that raises several concerns. So one thing is that the government didn't reduce the oil prices, and the second thing is that they have even increased the oil prices twice in the last 2 months, right? So this is a cause of concern. With the economic activity brought to a near standstill by the lockdown, the center's overall revenue prospects have come under severe strain, and from that perspective the government's move to maximize its taking from the transport fuel is understandable. But the fact that government has consistently tinkered with the duty structure through recent years of large benign oil prices undermines the benefits from pricing deregulation that ought to have accrued to oil companies and consumers. So here what the editorial is telling that, see, the oil price was deregulated, right? So 2 years before or something, the oil price was deregulated, so that it will be more inconsistent with the market prices, so that if the oil prices increase in the global market, then the Indian prices should also automatically increase, and if the oil prices reduces, then the Indian oil prices should also reduce. So this is called deregulation. The government will not be involving in the market, so the market price will be automatically determined by the market itself. But what is happening now is, when the oil prices is increasing, definitely the Indian oil prices, I mean, when the global price increases, the Indian price is increasing. But whereas when the global price is reducing, then the Indian oil prices are still not reducing. So then what is the benefit of deregulation? So the very purpose of deregulation has been failed, right? So with curbs on the interstate road transport still in place, contracting automobile sales are unlikely to recover anytime soon. Job losses and pay cuts sure to shrink the household budget. It is hard to see transport fuel demand rebounding to pre-lockdown levels for at least 1 or 2 quarters. So we know that the demand for the fuel has been reducing due to the lockdown, and it is not expected to improve in the next two financial quarters. Adding to is the fact that the government has already decided to privatize a lot of companies, right? So the government has fixed a disinvestment target of 2.1 lakh crore for this fiscal, and it also includes a stake sale in Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited, and the petroleum products pricing approach gets even more complicated due to this fact, due to the fact that BPCL stake is being sold. So all these things are complicating the petroleum prices, and in the end the consumers are being at the loss, right? Even if the global prices reduce, the consumers are not getting benefited. The government is getting benefited, getting more money for the government, telling that they'll spend it for welfare purposes, but it is the people that the who should be receiving, right? But now it is not happening. So that is the editorial about. Coming to the next editorial, the common factor. So it mainly talks about the US, the situation in which the United States is in. So here we just have to focus on some aspects, and we don't have to focus more on the politics of US. Like the editorial talks about the politics of US also, the coming presidential election and all. We don't have to focus much on that, but we have to focus on some areas, that is the growing tensions between US and China. President Donald Trump is entering deeper into a political quagmire on three related fronts. One is the America's death toll from the COVID-19 is perilously close to the psychologically important mark of 1 lakh. The death toll is reaching 1 lakh as of now. And the US economy is moving towards a recession. Also, the government is facing criticism uh, as the presidential election is coming near. So there is one factor that links all the three political hazard that Donald Trump is facing, that is China. On the pandemic front, Mr. Trump has regularly tweeted to the effect that the novel coronavirus ought to be called the China virus. Okay, and it leaked out of a Wuhan laboratory. So this is what Donald Trump is selling against China. On the economic front, the savage trade war that rolled the global markets through most of 2019 appeared to be near a resolution when Washington and Beijing inked the Phase 1 pact for lower tariffs and trade concessions this January. So in this January, there was some hope of reducing the trade war, but the pandemic appears to have set that process back considerably. Now, neither of the side will be in a mood to make concessions given the economic situation faced by both the countries. It is, however, the third factor. The presidential poll in November could be most significantly alter the landscape of the conflict-ridden bilateral ties. So, the opposition, that is the Democratic nominee for the president election, that is Joe Biden, he has launched several attacks on Mr. Trump, bungling in the early phases of the viral transmission, including repeated messages that the president was slow to respond to the warning signs from Wuhan and reluctant to lock down the US to enforce physical distancing. So, in order to counter this, the pro-Trump campaign organization have in turn taken to labeling Mr. Biden as Beijing Biden, right? So these kind of political things are happening in the US, and this is not particularly of concern for us. So what we have to focus is the tension which is increasing between US and China, which Chinese official has termed yesterday as the it can even result into a new Cold War. So this is the area which we have to focus from the UPSC perspective. Now, coming to the next article, how India can become self reliant. So, addressing the nation on the COVID 19 pandemic, Prime Minister Narendra Modi emphasized the necessity of a self reliant India. He said the need was brought home by the absence of domestic production of the PPE when the COVID 19 struck, but India initiated and quickly ramped up the PPE production. So now the Prime Minister has told that India is producing PPEs in numbers of like around lakhs per day. So this was in contrast to the pre COVID-19 situation where India was not even producing a single PPE. So, self-reliance. Now coming to India's self-reliance. Self-reliance in a state-run heavy industries and strategic sector in the decades following the independence had placed India ahead of most developing countries. So as we all know, soon after independence, India had focused on self-reliance, but so that has helped India to come come in front of improve more than many other developing countries in the 1950s and the 1960s. But coming to 1970s and 1980s, however, India did not modernize these industries to climb the climb higher up the technological ladder. So this was a deficiency from the part of India in the 20th century. So India's ecosystem was thus characterized by low productivity, poor quality, and low technology, and was globally uncompetitive. India competitively missed out on the third industrial revolution, comprising electronic goods, microprocessors, personal computers, mobile phones, and decentralized manufacturing and global value chain. So, this was the third industrial revolution, and India completely lost the opportunity of the third industrial revolution due to the technological outdated technology that India is having. Today, India is the world's second largest smartphone market. However, it does not make any of this phone itself and manufactures only a small fraction of solar voltaic cells and modules currently. So, India is totally dependent on imports from the mobile phone manufacturers. We can see a lot of Chinese mobile phones in the market, right? For example, Oppo, Vivo, and all, Redmi, and all. So, India's import in this electronic sector is too high. As the at the turn of the millennium, when India embarked on LPG reforms, the concept of self-reliance was totally rubbish, right? So two related ideas also came during this LPG era. One is that the public sector undertakings are by definition inefficient and sluggish for the for the competitive globalized scenario. So we might have heard this, like we heard that PSUs are totally inefficient and we have to privatize it to bring efficiency. So this idea has been we have been hearing it for a long time. So because of this idea, many of the PSUs were undermined or abandoned along with many nascent research and development efforts. So many R&D efforts were also affected due to this negative idea about the PSUs. On the other hand, the private sector displayed little interest in this heavy industries and showed no appetite for technology upgradation, and even the private sector was also not interested in the research and development. So in both the scenarios, India lost. Like already the research were conducted by the PSUs and they are being increasingly privatized now. Also the private sector is not improving the R&D also. So the second idea was that inviting foreign direct investment and manufacturing by foreign majors would bring new technologies into the industrial ecosystem, obviating the need for indigenous efforts towards self-reliance. So that was the second idea. India thought that if we bring more foreign countries into the to start up the manufacturing base in the country, then the technological upgradation will take place. Again, this idea became false because, however, mere setting up of manufacturing facilities in India is no guarantee to absorption of technology, because many of the companies they keep their important technological innovations outside India, right? Only is the low level manufacturing bases are being put in India, but there has not been any technological absorption into the country. So experience and achievements in other countries in Asia attest to this, and also contradict the notion that self-reliance is a hangover from Nehruvian socialism. So countries like South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and Hong Kong took huge technological and industrial strides in the 1970s and 80s. So this was the time when India had missed out, right? So also coming to China also unique in scale and determination to become a superpower, not only just geopolitically but also in self-reliant science and technology and industrial capability. So these countries like China, South Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore, and so these areas were able to improve the technology during this 1970s, 80s, and all where that time India had actually lost on this technological upgradation by 1991 LPG era. India's completely left its research and development capabilities, right? So China has already become the world leader, and they have a target to become a world leader by 2035 in 5G, supercomputing, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, biotech, pharma, and other technologies of the fourth industrial revolution. So, what is the way forward for India? Unfortunately, India may have well missed the bus in many of these technologies in which the US, Europe, and China have already established perhaps insurmountable leads. Yet, self-reliant capabilities in electric and fuel cell vehicles, electricity storage systems, solar cells and modules, aircrafts including UAVs, artificial intelligence, robotics and automation, biotech, pharma, and others are well within the reach. So these are the areas where India is not that behind also. So India can catch up to this, provided that proper research and development happens in India. So what is the need? State funded research and development, including in basic research by PSUs and research institutions, and the universities need to be scaled up significantly, well above the dismal 1% of the GDP currently. Only 1% of the GDP is spent for research and development purpose. So it has to be increased. Also, private sector delivery oriented research and development could also be supported, linked to meaningful participation in manufacturing appropriate levels of the supply chain. So India have to bring the private sector also. We have to incentivize the private sector to include be a part of the R&D, right? So finally, India's meager public expenditure on education needs to be substantially ramped up. So presently, India's education share is very less. No country has achieved self-reliance without mass quality public education, and no country has developed without a much stronger public health system than what we have in India. Okay, so this is what the article is telling about. It talks about the self-reliance idea which is proposed by the Prime Minister. Coming to the next news article, Arogya Setu app is now open source, says government. So we all know that Arogya Setu is an app which is developed by the National Informatics Center as well as the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, METI, right? So this was developed in order to fight the COVID-19 pandemic through contact tracing. So the contact tracing also uses Bluetooth as well as GPS technology. Also, there were many concerns related to privacy with respect to the Arogya Setu app. Now, a good step is taken by the government by making the Arogya Setu app open source. So now everyone can see how the app is made, the source code behind it, and they can also suggest improvements and find the bugs in the Arogya Setu app. Now coming to the news, amid concerns over privacy of data being collected by its COVID-19 contact tracing app, the government on Tuesday said it was open sourcing Arogya Setu. The government has also launched a bug bounty program wherein financial rewards will be given to security researchers for finding any vulnerability in the application or suggesting improvements to the source code. So here you have to note the program by the government, that is bug bounty program. It is to suggest improvements and find vulnerabilities in the Arogya Setu app. Also, 98% of the 11.4 crore users of Arogya Setu users are on Android platform, and the remaining are on iOS platform. So this step will have a positive impact on the privacy of the Indian users. This will improve transparency on how the data is used, improve security by minimizing bugs, and empower experts to improve the app via public contributions. So the big bounty program will be open to Indian as well as foreign nationals, but only Indians will be eligible for rewards offered under this scheme. So this is the new reform which has been suggested, but there are some more things which the government can do. So what are all those things? One is, anyway, Arogya Setu is an app which is collecting data from the people, right? So it's better as we all know, right to privacy is a part of a fundamental right also, as per the Puttaswamy judgment. So it is better to have a legislation on this matter, so that any data or privacy breach by the government, any data collection on privacy by the government is based on a law. So that is the right thing to do, right? So many countries over the world, for example Israel, Australia and all, they have also have contact tracing apps like this for COVID-19, but they have also enacted legislation to bring this app to bring more legality into this app. So a legislation should be given. Also, another defect here is we can see that only 11.4 crores people are using Arogya Setu. So for a country of 130 crore or something, so it comes to around less than 10% of the total population is using Arogya Setu. So this won't be effective, right? For an app like contact tracing app like Arogya Setu to be more effective, at least more than 60% of the population should be using it. So first bring in a legislation, then tell all the people to use it, so that the contact tracing will be more effective. Also, another reform which can be done is to bring a common platform for Apple and as well as Google Play Store, right? So for both Android and Apple platform, they should combine together and it should be a single platform. So what is the benefit of the single platform? One is the power will be saved. The power, that is the battery used by this app, will be saved. For example, we all know that if any app is consuming a lot of battery in our mobile phones, we won't be interested in installing it, right? So we'll uninstall it later. So to avoid this, a common platform of Android and iOS can help in this power saving way. Also, this the benefit of this common platform is that the data will be stored in the mobile itself, so the data won't be stored outside the mobile. So from in the privacy front also, this common platform will help. So these are the some of the other reforms which the government can do regarding the Arogya Setu app. So one is the legislation, second is bringing more population into the Arogya Setu app, preferably in a voluntary manner. Okay, so even if it has to be made mandatory, there should be legislation for it, right? So this is called the test of proportionality, which is being given in the Puttaswamy judgment, right? Also, the third thing is bring a common platform for I mean for Android as well as iOS. So this can be done. Now coming to the last news article, GDP to contract by 5% in financial year 21. CRISIL. Rating agency CRISIL expects India's economy to shrink by 5% during the current financial year as the nationwide lockdown crippled economic activities. So the non-farm sector growth rate is seen to contract by 6%, with agricultural activity providing a cushion with an estimated growth of 2.5%. So when you try to answer about the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, you should be more specific. You shouldn't just say that economy has been badly impacted. Okay, so you can't just simply say that. So it's better to analyze the economy in a sector wise manner. For example, the agriculture, health services, defense services and all, these are the least affected by COVID-19 pandemic, and they're expected to grow at a good rate. Here you can see agriculture sector is estimated to grow at 2.5%, right? So there are some sectors in the economy which will not be affected much by the COVID-19 pandemic, and there are some other sectors, for example manufacturing, trade, tourism, travel, also hotels, restaurants. So these are the sectors of the economy which are badly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and they are actually expected to grow only at a 30% of the previous year growth rate, right? So when you answer any question related to economic impact of COVID-19, try to be more specific with regard to the sectors, because the economy is not a single thing, right? It has various sectors. You have to analyze it sector wise to see that which sector is affected the most. So here you can see that the non-farm sector is affected the most, expecting a contraction of around 6%. Also the first quarter, that is this quarter, April to June, it is expected to suffer a staggering 25% contraction. The report said in the past 69 years, the country had seen recession only thrice. One was in 1958, then 1966 and 1980s. And the reason for all these three recessions were due to agricultural activities, like a monsoon shock that hit agriculture, and then a sizable part of the economy was affected. But this time it is not agriculture sector but related to non-farm sectors because of the pandemic. Also, counting lockdown 4.0, Indians have already had 68 days of confinement. Global estimates suggest that 1 month of lockdown shaves 3% of the annual GDP on an average across Asia Pacific. So this is like an economic impact of the GDP. 1 month of lockdown can reduce 3% of the GDP. Chrysler also said that the government's economic package of 20 lakh crore is enough muscle. The package has some short-term measures to cushion the economy, but sets its side majorly on reforms. We all know that the package announced by the government, that is the 10% GDP stuff, it actually focuses more on reforms, right? But the problem with reforms is that it will pay off only in the medium and long term, right? So that is an issue with the package. Otherwise, the amount of the package is fine, but there are very less short term benefits. So that is what the Chrysler report is telling. Now coming to the other articles, a time for reforms in court, page 7. So this is regarding the reforms which are necessary in the justice system, judiciary. in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, like more video conferencing. And before doing video conferencing, there are some reforms which are necessary. So there you just glance through the article. You don't have to read it more specifically because it is more more legal, right? So you don't have to go much into deep into that. Just have a glance through the article. Also, coming to the second article, an effective lockdown in page 7. So this is an article by the minister, which says about which says about the success of the lockdowns. You can glance through this also. So that's all for today's news articles. I hope you like the video. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, as well as share the video with your friends. Have a great day. Thank you.